Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast. My name is Philip Ideson, a 20-year procurement practitioner, former head of procurement and advisor to procurement leaders around the world. I started Art of Procurement to help leaders and their teams access the resources they need to increase their impact through insight-driven procurement. You are listening to our flagship podcast where we pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics and tools that leading procurement teams are using to align their impact with the needs of their business. Today on the show, I'm delighted to welcome Jaime Robles. Jaime has enjoyed a number of procurement executive roles around the world for companies such as 7-Eleven, Philips, GE, and Walmart. Today, he's the Vice President of Procurement and Sourcing at Casey's General Stores. With nearly 2,200 locations in 16 midwestern states, Casey's is one of the largest convenience chains in the US with annual revenues of almost $10 billion. Now, what makes Casey's particularly interesting from our perspective is that they've grown to be a $10 billion revenue company without a procurement group. So Jaime joined last year to build the procurement team from the ground up. With all of the experience that he has to inform him on what the future of procurement should look like, he's really looking at doing things differently without the restraints of previous technology investments or organizational designs. He really has a blank slate. And so today we talk about how he is approaching that opportunity. So let's go into our conversation where I start by asking Jaime if he found procurement or if procurement found him.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think life found me. I mean, procurement did. Out of college, I studied finance and accounting, but I never wanted to be an accountant, to be very honest. And I wanted to study finance. I wanted to be a businessman. And I'm from Mexico, so whenever you were out of college, literally you were just looking for a job, whatever that might be, whatever life takes you. And because there are not many options out there, right? And also we have a crisis every 6 years whenever we have a new president. So I graduated from college right off in the middle of a crisis. So there were not many jobs. So literally what I found, it was a job as a supply chain, the automotive industry. You know, it was a very tough, difficult environment. It was a very low paid job where you were pretty much a planner buyer.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a clue about that, to be very honest, but I learned on the job. And that's how I started my journey in supply chain, and procurement, strategic sourcing. And from there, I started selling myself to the new jobs that I was taking with other companies. And that's how I ended up my whole life being in procurement.
So as you went on from that kind of beginnings, what was it that kept you in procurement? What was it about it you thought, you know what, I enjoy this, I'm good at this, I'm going to keep on, going up the career ladder?
So I always been a good negotiator, I think, by nature. I'm the youngest of 5 kids in my family. I struggle, with many things in life, and we're from a very humble beginnings and a humble family. So you have to fight for whatever you wanted to get. So being a good negotiator and being a street smart, it was always a good asset, right? So when I found these jobs, I noticed that, okay, one of the good aspects was you were negotiating with vendors and suppliers and negotiating terms, pricing, and deals and contracts, and that get me going. I was like, oh wow, this is cool. It feels great that you are saving money for the company, that you are having these great relationships with vendors, and they treat you so well, and you are like you got the power somehow to take decisions, etc. So that was a really I would say what I loved about it at the very beginning. I felt all that immediately. And then moving forward, start seeing the value about how you can impact, the operations of the company. I was part of the automotive industry, so all the implications about shutting down a production line or something like that also was very intriguing. And at the same time, I think when you were dealing with different functions, right? So I always see procurement as you deal with every single function in the company. So you start building those customer relationships and building a stakeholder commitment and engagement. And that also was very intriguing and was very exciting as well, in comparison with other friends that I had that were, in other functions such as IT, or they were in AP, or they were in finance, etc. And I would say, okay, I'm dealing with all of them. So I think those were the two elements that really loved from the very beginning. Yeah. And the pressure, of course, the high pressure, the stress in the automotive industry, and the day-to-day, and the inventory levels, and all that stuff.
There's something to be said for the auto industry. That's where I got my start as well. And I think that's a bug that, really bites you, because there's something about being able to see what you've done driving down the road. I think you can actually feel it's like tangible what you're working on. And sometimes when you're on the indirect space, or when you start in the indirect space, you don't necessarily get that. I know that was a big thing for me, for sure.
No, you're completely right. Seeing something that is measured, right? So, for instance, I always, even until this day, sometimes I wonder, I say, how do they evaluate themselves in other functions, right? So, for me, it's quite simple. It's very tangible. It's very figures and facts oriented function. It's savings, customer service, value. You got all kind of KPIs and metrics, right? How do they do that in IT?
Right.
How do they do that in, I don't know, in HR? How do they do that in, I don't know, in some other areas, right? How do they evaluate performance and results and how you measure success in many different areas, and how do you present it to different functions?
Now, from those starts, and you've had a pretty diverse and successful career. You've worked for companies like 7-Eleven, for Philips, for GE, where you, I think, had a pretty significant global spend. And I just wonder, as you've kind of gone through your career, are there things that have shaped your perspective on what procurement is, what procurement can be, and, how as a procurement leader you actually interact with the rest of the business? Like some core principles, perhaps, that really inform what you do every day.
Yeah, from the very beginning, I was very lucky and blessed to be part of a great company. I had the opportunity after working in the automotive industry, I moved to 7-Eleven for a couple of years, and I learned a bunch about the customer service oriented organization, where the customer should be in the middle of all your actions, and whatever you do is for your customers, etc. So it was a very informative, and which is completely different from procurement perspective, that you never think about customers, right? And service levels and all that stuff. But that helped me through my career, being a more customer service oriented organization in procurement. When I moved to Philips, I had the opportunity to live abroad in many different places. And with Philips, we were going through a whole One Philips procurement transformation at that time. I had a great manager, and he was a great mentor for me as well. And I believe, and we're talking at the time that we didn't have good Wi-Fi. We still could hear the modem in the back end of the room. We didn't have iCloud. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have all this, technology nowadays is everywhere, right? So it was, I think that was the other breakthrough that I went through in those 10 years in Philips, to see how technology was shaping how procurement was done. In terms of, in the past, we were looking at everything on historic perspective, right? So how much we pay, so how much can we pay now? And we will get 3 quotes and just run your compliance report, and that's it, and send faxes and run and spend reports with no smart data. So nothing like what we have today. So I think customer service was one of the most important ones. Technology, it was definitely the top whenever we start ramping up into all those technology tools available for the company. And then I think the consolidation came in later years, where you can apply all those concepts to what you were doing every single day and building the teams, being remote, having a global organization and a global team. I remember connecting, it was through teleconference, right? So everybody has to dial in and put the passcode. So we all were on the phone. There were no cameras, nothing like that. And it's a very different environment to navigate and to connect with customers and stakeholders on different functions. So I think those two were critical to shape how you want to move forward in your career, technology and customer service.
So you take those now to where you are today, and you are Vice President of Procurement and Sourcing at Cases. And before I kind of tee up the question, I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about Cases for any listeners who may not understand or have heard of Cases before.
Yes, of course. So Cases is it's a great company. It's a convenience store chain. We got 2,200 locations in the Midwest of the U.S., 16 states in total. So we are the fifth largest convenience store retail chain, and we are also one of the top pizza companies for the U.S. So our pizza is it's a brand for a company, and people recognize our company a lot by our pizza. So we are growing double digits. It's a $10 billion company. We're growing double digits. COVID represented a huge opportunity for our company. We took advantage of that, and our growth, we've been having one of the biggest expansion years for the company in history. And we got a new management. We got a new executive team in place here, starting with Darren, our CEO, last year. And he has been very refreshing for the whole company, putting a new team together and refreshing the whole organization all over the place in every single function. And the company didn't have procurement in the past as a function. And they reached out to me, and it's a very challenging opportunity, but at the same time, it's a huge one for my career. And they've been very supportive into what we're trying to accomplish here. So we got a couple $millions on spend, and we're trying to make a huge impact. As you can imagine, a company this size without a proper procurement professional function in place, there are opportunities in every single corner.
Yeah, $10 billion almost in revenue with no procurement. What was the burning platform? Like, why now?
I think because first, because Darren was here and he saw the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
First. So he noticed that, hey, how it's possible that we are this big and we don't have a procurement function in place. Number two, I think because procurement is more and more recognized as a growth platform, and our new CFO, Steve Ramlish, has recognized that as well, to see procurement as an enabler for different functions and for all the growth that we're having in the company. So that's why they wanted to have somebody that knows how to build organization from scratch, how to put the teams together, the platforms, and build this transformation across the organization to support the whole company vision.
So you get seated in your role, you have basically a blank sheet of paper. We talked a little bit before about kind of the fundamentals that have shaped some of your perspective. So where do you even start? How do you start thinking about the future state vision?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. So when you get into a company this size and you got a white canvas in front of you and say, okay, where do you start, right? So you say, okay, I spend these couple billion of dollars, different categories. We got direct and indirect. You are the head of procurement for the whole company. So where do you start? And I think, in my opinion, and of course, I've been talking to many other people around for years. You always need to start with the procurement foundation. And the procurement foundation is your P2P process, right? So how do you procure to pay today and have that first step? And then how do you source to pay? And then how do you build a team? and etc. So you start taking those steps through maturity, and that's how we did it with Philips and how we did it with GE as well. So in that sense, that's where we started. So, okay, let me work in parallel in two elements. So let me build the procurement foundation. I need a P2P platform where we can operate as a function and as a company, and we need that technology. That is going to be the center hub of my function of procurement. And we need to put that hub and that technology in the core of the business. And that's why we selected Coupa, in fact, to be our partner in this endeavor. And we will kick off Coupa implementation in the next 2 weeks, in fact. So it took us 75 days from the day I joined the company to select a new platform and to put and execute the contract and to move forward. And that is going to be your technology in the hub. In parallel, I'm building the team. Yep. So we need the skills and the professionals to know how to play around that technology. And I'm doing that a little bit different here in Casey, because I'm a true believer that if you put technology on its core for procurement and you have the P2P in the center, and then you have all these ancillary technology platforms for different needs, for CLM, for tail spend, for e-sourcing, for auctions, for whatever other needs you have that maybe it's not in the core of a P2P system. What you need to have is a team that is not organized by categories that historically procurement has been doing it, or by commodities, or by expertise. I believe that expertise these days is data, and data, if it can be accessed in those technology platforms, what you really need is people that are curious, that are strategic sourcing experts rather than subject matter experts, right? So I need somebody that knows how to identify an opportunity, go get the data, team up with the stakeholder, and build a strategy together and run the sourcing process together. So, and that's how we're building the team here at Cases. Yeah, I call it like a SWAT team, right? So they just go grab the data, identify the opportunity, team up with the stakeholders, and then go after all those opportunities. And this is a maturity process that we need to go through as well.
Now, how do you, so there's an interesting kind of discussion around, I had a roundtable that I facilitated probably a month ago across a number of different CPOs. And one of the interesting points of discussion was, are we kind of evolving away from category management to more stakeholder management, and having somebody responsible from a relational perspective? And like you say, you have like this center of excellence who know the data, who they may not know the categories inside and out, but they're able to, they're basically facilitating an ecosystem of experts and sourcing folks behind the scenes with a customer-focused kind of perspective rather than going category-focused. And I just wonder, like, your perspective, because it sounds like you're thinking about this of, not necessarily having a bunch of category managers across the board, but having folks who know how to interpret the data, and then it's about influencing. It's about influencing change as opposed to knowing everything there is to know about a category.
Yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer, Philip, to be very honest. I mean, when I was in those years of Philips and we were designing I remember at that time, we called it the best in class one Philips procurement organization or something like that. And we're talking again, 2005, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I'm old. So I remember at that time we were trying to come up with what is the best in class procurement organization? What does that mean, right? And I think we were very challenging ourselves, but we were very progressive at that time, and we said a procurement organization will be a one that doesn't exist. So we wanted to remove the need of having a procurement team in place, because we have a bunch of buyers all over the world, and we got everybody doing transactional work, operational work, day-to-day operations, but we didn't have anything strategic, and we were very transactional-oriented company. We said, how do we move this into more strategic thinking, where people is seeing procurement as a enabler and not as a roadblock and approval process? And that's when we decided, okay, how do we remove ourselves? how do we do this more efficiently and be a couple of steps ahead? And I think the answer was always technology. And that's why for me, it's a no-brainer today that we're talking in 2020 about technology. I mean, with all those commodity category managers, I mean, yeah, expertise is necessary, of course. It's very important, it's very necessary. But I think in 10 years from now, we will have SME. I mean, you got the functions for that, right? So if you look at IT or you look at indirect sourcing, how can you have SMEs for everything that you got in indirect sourcing in different industries? It's extremely complicated, right? So you got the function that is you should partner with. You got the vendors. You should have a supply relationship program in place. They are the experts, right? So if you got great strategic sourcing people that knows the steps, that knows how to find opportunities, that knows how to partner greatly and have a great customer service oriented advocacy and connect with stakeholders, connect with the functions, bring the suppliers on board, having those discussions. I mean, technology should give you that platform, but you need technology in the middle of all those actions. You need the platforms connected to each other to give you the data, give you the analytics, give you the AI, the machine learning, the deep learning to help you through all that. I do see in the future that technology is going to replace all that. I mean, that we will have an open marketplace where pretty much whoever wants to sell me some stuff and who wants to be part of my, procurement catalog and vendor database, they can access, they can see what are my needs, they can bid on it and be more proactive, more in an open marketplace, without having all those rigorous steps today. And I think that's going to be the future moving forward.
Now, you mentioned technology there. You mentioned kind of this idea of we shouldn't really even exist, or you should always be on a path, I think, to, this is something I've always felt, you should always be on a path to outsource yourself in whatever your current job is.
Yeah.
And so with those in mind, do you see much more, at least, well, I'll ask you from a couple of perspectives. One, what you're building at Cases, but two, generally for the procurement industry or procurement community, where we're moving much more towards the idea of self-service. Like we're enabling self-service within the business, within some parameters.
Exactly.
But we shouldn't be doing all this sourcing all the time when the folks in the business are, although we like sometimes to say, oh, they don't know what they're doing, and if we get involved, we'll save all this money. And I think that's a security blanket sometimes for us. But people in the business have the ability to buy. We should be helping them do that.
Well, look at my cases, right? So somebody's spending all that money today, right? Yeah. Somebody's buying, somebody has a supply relationship, somebody's getting the contracts done, somebody's negotiating them in a way or another. So I am trying to move all that into a couple, I think, at least, again, if I'm going through this maturity process, I can go from 1 to 100 in 3 months, right? But it's a process. So I believe that we can build and move into self-service mode as much as we can, right? Because everything has been done in the back end.
Yeah.
So you need to buy something, go into the technology platform, find it yourself, build your shopping cart, buy it, and go through the approval levels, and that's it. And then the P2P process will take care of the receipt, invoice payment, PO, approvals, etc. Now, there's some instances where you need some help. So for those, you need a guided buying, and maybe you will need to contact somebody in procurement. Hey, I don't know exactly what I'm buying. It's not a catalog-based item. Maybe it's an RFI. Maybe I have a marketing campaign. Maybe I need to spend on labor, and maybe I need contingent labor, or maybe a consultancy or whatever. Okay, let's build that together. Let's have a sourcing event. Let's decide what will be the steps or what is required, and I can help you with that. Again, I'm using the technology that is available out there. I'm connected with you as a customer service-oriented model, and you're my stakeholder. We build an engagement, and together we go to the market and we find what you're looking for. Uh, I believe on that. So, and I think more and more should be moved into that type of those two models to operate. And and that is happening today in one way or another. You look at it. So they are doing it by themselves. But maybe they are not procurement professionals, or they don't know the players. How do they know which vendors to buy, right? How do they know what kind of templates? How do they know how to negotiate with vendors, or how to get the terms and conditions? So that's what I'm trying to build here, is to give the power to the function, to my users, to do that by their own, if we have all that accessible in a platform and technology environment.
So then you talked a little bit about, helping enable the stakeholders buy on their own. You kind of take that out of the equation. What's left? What does procurement as a functional area focus on? Assuming that you got to a point where a lot of the buying is guided and that you're really playing more of a consultative role on those kinds of purchases that can go through that process.
I believe we need to move into the strategic value of that. Mm-hmm. Where can we find more value for the company, right? Because not everything is about buying or reduce costs, because there will be instances where we need to grow and we need to find new stuff to enable the company growth, right? Or find opportunities to how do we bring value to the P&L? Because at the end, procurement is not about savings; it's about value,
right?
And how the value can be reflected in your P&L, and the value can come from many different instances. Savings is just one of them. Customer service, and then removing leakage or waste, or having a more streamlined process, or maybe just to enable users interact with vendors and the SRM program. So the quality, there's so many different inventory levels. I mean, there's so many areas where we can focus our resources into more strategic thinking, mm-hmm. to find where to bring value to the company, because the transactional piece, the day-to-day operations of the procurement is already taken care of by this technology, and the stakeholders and the customers just buying by themselves, because everything is in the self-service out there. And we already did all that job in the back end.
Yeah.
So that's the way, kind of simplistic, but you need to start again with the technology in the core. And if a company wants to go in a model like that, and they are operating as we did in my previous companies, where we have 23 different ERPs, mm-hmm. and we have not connected platform. We couldn't even know where's my spend today, how to categorize that. And they are still talking about taxonomy and UNSPC codes. I mean, that is light years into where we should be.
Yeah. It's still amazing to me how we're still talking about category taxonomy and spend analytics still being.
Yeah.
So I think maybe this comes back from the automotive upbringing as well. And maybe it's the same for you, that, the things that we did in automotive 20 years ago, you didn't necessarily appreciate that they were, that some of the things we were doing were fairly advanced. It didn't feel like that at the time. And then you step away. I stepped away from automotive to go into pharmaceutical. And it was a real eye-opener that some of those same practices didn't necessarily exist yet outside of automotive. And I think in some cases they still don't. Not for everybody, of course. It's kind of tarring everyone with the same brush. But when you think about some of the general practices that haven't necessarily jumped into other businesses and other industries yet.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree with you. I was thinking when you were describing that piece in the automotive, I was thinking, because last weekend we were talking about, how all this is going to look like in 10 years. And I was expressing, maybe not there, that is my dream, right? But what about one day, of course, certain categories where you could have all that open to the public and say, well, I'm buying plastic cups at $1. These are my volumes. Mm-hmm. Everybody can see it. This is my supplier. These are my quality. These are my specs. And you got something like that for most of those spend categories in your company all across. And everybody can have access to that marketplace and see, I would like to participate on that one. I would like to see that. I mean, why we cannot be that open?
Yeah, it's funny. We got to hold of it. Information is power. I always say this, that, I think that's our upbringing, is that we feel like if we give all this information out, we're giving in some way some kind of leverage in negotiation. And I think we're missing out and actually encouraging interesting solutions, because then we're just telling people what we think is the best way to buy versus what the industry can tell us is the best way that you should buy.
Exactly. Completely agree with you on that. It's one of the very first steps that I always like to take whenever I take these jobs and challenges in companies is, how do we bring transparency in procurement? I always like that. I like the exercise of taking what is so top secret and make it available.
Yeah.
First, internally. Can we tell our stakeholder how much they spend on X, Y, or Z category? The moment that you show them that you show them how much money they spend, and then you break it down by category, and then you break it down by vendor, and then you break it down by items, and it's an eye-opening moment. And I always think about why we cannot be open on that to the public. In again, certain categories, of course, there's competition, there's a bunch of stuff, but certain stuff that are commodities that are very well known, that, hey, this is how much I spend, these are my volumes, this is all my stuff. So whoever wants to participate, it's not a sourcing event, it's just a marketplace.
Yeah.
And that's how it's here in the future, because in the future we will have so much AI, and AI is going to be, and is already driving this world somehow in many ways. Why in the future I need to rely on to what or today they are doing in many different companies? They got a category manager for MRO billings, and he's the person that will tell you how much you should pay for XYZ item from this brand, OEM, etc. So why that cannot be driven by an AI platform where in the future, instead of you relying into the experience of this person and the historic prices we pay and the analysis they made on the market, why not a platform is going to tell you, hey, you're paying 10 for this, and I think based on the different million data points that we can collect and all that stuff, we can evaluate through this algorithm that the new price to pay is this one. And that can be whole for the next 3 months for these reasons, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the vendors can join an effort or can participate on that, or can try to sell you that piece this moment, and the next month it's going to be a different vendor, and the next month it's a different one.
Right.
I don't know. I think it's more dynamic. That's what I'm calling about.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Your background at Philips. So back in the day when I was in automotive, I bought automotive lighting. And that's a market where it's highly commoditized, even though companies like Philips may try and tell me it's not. As a buyer,
I know.
Philips, GE, Osram, and every year we would do it yearly. We'd go and completely shake up the supply chain for all those based on competitive pressures in the market, and knowing that Philips this year had a new product on a certain bulb, and therefore they had a desire to get more volume on a production line, and that allowed us to then, do all kinds of things in terms of have them take on some more commoditized items at lower cost. But you basically go to the market all the time. And we did it annually because, back in the day, it was all done on spreadsheet. This is, and again, I'm kind of dating myself here, but this is probably 2002 through 2005. Yeah. But, huge benefits from doing that. It seems like a no-brainer to have technology doing it for us. I guess it's just a matter of time.
It's a matter of time. I think there are companies already working on that and doing it. I found a couple companies that are already working on that in certain categories and commodities where it's very objective. It's not. It's more materials oriented categories and items that if they are heavily involved with labor and services and all that stuff. But going to your point. Yeah, that happened to those industries. Technology hit them. I mean, simple as that. I mean, as you said, the light bulb, Like all this is a commodity, and it has been for years and years and years. And that's why you see GE and Philips, Siemens, and all those big companies getting out of the business on those industries, because they just cannot make money anymore because it's all like commodity. Yep. Look at TV. TV, I mean, years ago, TV was a huge business, and it's a commodity business. Well, and every year the TVs are cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So everything is going to become a commodity one day or another, and it matters how you want to play the field for those categories.
Well, Jaime, I know it's about time to wrap up. So first of all, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's going to be really interesting to watch kind of the journey as you start to take this blank sheet of paper, but $9 billion, $10 billion organization, and see how that evolves over the next 6, 12, 18 months or so. I have one last question, and that's just if anybody has listened into the show, they'd be interested in connecting directly with you, where would be the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you again. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. And if you're interested to learn more about what we're doing here at Casey's, you want to be part of the team, you want to be part of an exciting organization, please contact me. You can find my LinkedIn contact information, Jaime Robles, or you can also send me an email to Casey to jaime.robles@caseys.com. And I will be happy to connect with all of you. I'm very interested to see in a year from now, Philip, how things actually
we'll do a new pod together.
Turn out. Exactly. We should do a follow-up. Okay, what happened a year later? That would be great.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link to your LinkedIn profile in our show notes page for today's episode, so people can go directly there as well. And that's going to be at artofprocurement.com/podcast. That's artofprocurement.com/podcast. So one last time, I just want to thank you so much for joining me. I want to thank you for listening into today's episode of The Art of Procurement. To go deeper, including access to transcripts and actionable outtakes from the podcast, join the free level of our AOP Mastermind community. To learn more, go to artofprocurement.com/mastermind. And to find our entire back catalogue of almost 400 episodes, go to